quality trained security officers and virtual officers.
All right. Welcome to the Titan Use of Force debrief, where we break down security officer incidents and security officers in the wild. I'm Ryan Smith with Titan Protection, Josh Leon, our Chief of Security, and we are breaking down today a clip of a security officer. This is a news story about a security officer dealing with somebody in a IRS building. He is protecting, or his post is in IRS building, and he encounters a subject with a firearm.
Okay.
A terrifying moment at the IRS office. A taxpayer comes in to do some business and is confronted by the security guard who pulls his gun. But the taxpayer has a gun too because he's in uniform for his job as a deputy sheriff. Les Trent tells you what happened next.
A sheriff's deputy stops by the IRS with a routine question about his taxes. He has no idea the terrifying standoff that's about to erupt. A security guard tells him he has to remove his gun. The deputy says he can't do that and walks away. That's when the guard pulls his weapon and aims it right at the deputy.
I'm thinking, wow, this man's going to shoot me in my back.
Well, I think we can stop there.
Well, and let's break this down. When we look at lethal force, which is what the security officer is presenting, he's drawing his firearm.
Yep.
We look at lethal force and justify it based on means, opportunity, and jeopardy.
Yeah, it's an equation.
So explain means, opportunity, jeopardy. I know you use motive sometimes for jeopardy, but explain what that is.
So the bad guy in any situation, all right, whether you're a private citizen defending yourself, police officer, security officer, whatever, the bad guy has to be displaying the three things. All three boxes have to be checked. It cannot be half a one. It cannot be, 2 1/4. It has to be, all three boxes have to be checked. Here are the boxes. Box number one means they have a gun, they have a knife, they have blunt force trauma, so on and so forth, okay? Box number two is opportunity. There can be a guy with a gun across town who wants to kill me, but I don't get to start shooting at him. The opportunity has to be imminent. It has to be happening right then, right now. Can't have happened in the past, and then I'm going to revenge it or anything like that. It's right here. It's imminent, all right? And box number three is jeopardy/motive. And that means that they are displaying the behavior to where we are in reasonable fear, and that word reason is a very big deal, reasonable, that we are in reasonable fear that this person is acting in a manner to where they are of a great threat to or for great bodily harm, or they're going to kill you, officer, whoever it is that's defending themselves. And what this security guard strikes me as somebody who has not either been trained on that equation, or somebody who's forgotten pieces of that equation, or somebody who is outrightly ignoring that equation.
Or just got over his skis and got into something that didn't know how to. And so to paint that, so if I'm sitting here cleaning my firearm while we're talking, right? I have opportunity because I obviously am close enough I could shoot you with it. I have the means because I have the firearm, but what's missing is the jeopardy. Me and you are sitting here talking whatnot. Now that changes if I've got the gun and I'm going, Josh, I hate you, I'm going to kill you.
Sure.
Then now you have all three. And in this scenario, the deputy has the means because he's got a firearm. The opportunity's there, but I think what's missing is the jeopardy.
It usually is, because when you think about your everyday life as an American citizen, maybe you have an encounter with a police officer who's walking into a restaurant the same time you are. Well, he's got two of those three elements right there.
Right.
Maybe you're having an encounter with a CCW person as you're walking into Target or into Walmart or into a million other stores. Well, two of the elements are present right there.
Right.
You driving next to somebody on the highway, two of those elements are present right there, but they're just not behaving in that manner. And the thing is this, like I said, what that video shows to me, it's one of those three things that he just hasn't been trained, he forgot the training, or he is deliberately just, I guess you're right, maybe over his head could be a possibility, or he's ignoring the training that he did get, if he did get any whatsoever. But that, I'll go you one further. I wouldn't be surprised at all if I've never seen this, but I would go you one further. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they end up arresting the security officer.
Let's see how it plays out.
Because I could hear the anger in his voice
An urgent call was placed to 911, but there's not one word that the guy they were concerned about was a deputy.
We got a taxpayer at the IRS office that has a gun and he won't leave the premises.
Interesting to me that he's identifying him as a taxpayer.
I mean, right? Didn't that seem? I mean,
So it almost
we're
makes
not going, hey, there's a sheriff's deputy in here.
Yeah, you might want to add that detail, but
Right.
it's what's interesting to me is that means, and maybe this is something for the security officer to point at, there's a culture there. There's
Right.
a culture at that business of to where we're not identifying this as and
I wonder who made that call.
yeah, that's a strange call.
Yeah.
That's a strange call. And for them to identify it that way, I think you got a culture of there's to be no guns here.
Right.
I work at the IRS. I'm an IRS employee.
What's he doing?
He's got a gun and he won't leave.
The deputy, Alan Gaston, does try to leave, but the
Now he's
guard
sticking his
blocks
foot
the
in the door.
elevator door.
I asked him about 5 or 6 times, just move your foot so I can go. Nope, you're not going anywhere.
Imagine their surprise when the Toledo, Ohio Police Department got there and realized the allegedly dangerous intruder was their colleague from the county sheriff's department. What happened when the police showed up?
The police were extremely confused. They did ask him, you do know he is a full-time deputy sheriff? And he said yes.
The tables were turned. Instead of the deputy being charged, the security guard was arrested for aggravated menacing. Deputy Gaston still can't believe what happened.
We're supposed to be on the same team.
The security guard has pled not guilty to the menacing charge. The deputy and his wife have filed a civil suit against the guard and the security companies that employ him.
Well, and then what about this? So why are you pointing your gun at the sheriff's deputy, but 2 more cops show up and you're not pointing the gun at them?
That's a great point.
I mean, what is? What
And
are
for
you
me,
doing?
I think the officer, I think it's one of those things that I think if you don't give security officers training, they resort to what they think or what they, and you get into a scenario and there's no out for him.
Yeah.
Once you have the gun drawn, does he have it in him to go, this is a bad idea, I should, you know what, my mistake, put it back? I mean, where do you go from there?
and how do you walk it back? Yeah.
So from a security officer standpoint, I think obviously the training and when to engage in that type of thing, if you're going to give people firearms, you've got to give them answers to some of these questions in training. I think it's scary. I mean, from our perspective,
Sure.
we know, and kind of the reason why I know I started Titan was coming in contact as a law enforcement officer with security officers and just the lack of training. The industry standard is watch a 1 or 2 hour video and go be a security officer. And when you start putting guns in people's hands, that gets scary.
And we even go further than that. Listen, I mean, we have a, entry level position, just like all security companies. So, where you're going to go to, do certain things and get certain aspects of the training. But as soon as you step foot into, I mean, all of our officers get trained, but as soon as you step foot into our armed process, to be an armed officer for us, the scrutiny hits another level. I mean, it just does, because the possibility of you making an error like this, and just to show how little he was trained or his lack of knowledge of that equation, or when do I go to my weapon, he does it at one point and then he abandons the policy totally when there's 2 more firearms right there in his presence. And it just is not making any sense to me. And as I thought, the tables are going to turn and it's going to end up being on the security officer, which absolutely can happen. I mean, that absolutely can.
That's your officer. Does he survive this incident from employee? Is he still an employee after this happens?
Obviously, any buddy in my position would have to follow their human resources guidelines and things like that. But I can tell you this: I would be knocking on our human resources office attempting to terminate that employee.
Yeah, I would have some serious concerns with
Yeah.
somebody handling a firearm. Now, switching to the deputy, you got to give him some credit, because you look at the opposite of that, and the security officer has the opportunity and the means. Is the jeopardy there? I mean, I'm pretty nervous if I'm but then does that escalate the situation? He pulls the gun out, now
Sure.
all of a sudden but to take a step back and to walk out and let the police come and deal with it. But
That's what he did, and I commend him for being that cool. I commend that deputy for being that that level-headed. You're going to have some officer safety guys who are going to point at man, I don't know. He turned his back on a security officer who obviously doesn't know what he's doing. That deputy knew that security officer didn't know what he was doing, and that's, but he's turning his back on him was a very scary thing to do. I'll tell you, I guess my last assessment would be
I think he was trying to be as little of a threat as possible, so he could just it's a wild animal that let's
walk away from this.
Right.
But no, and he did great. That's fantastic. I will say this though, if I'm sitting on a jury or tons and tons of people I know, and the deputy, looks over his shoulder and says, "Stop pointing that gun at me! Stop pointing that gun at me! You're making me nervous for my safety." And he engages. I think the deputy comes out in better standing than the security officer does.
Right.
I just do.
It's a bad scenario. That's what does the deputy have opportunity, means, and jeopardy? The jeopardy piece is what we're contemplating here. Is there enough jeopardy there that the deputy should have pulled a firearm and taken care of that situation?
And I said this to you a couple episodes ago. One of the things of our training is I always tell our officers, our security officers, if you're walking away and somebody's bringing the fight towards you, it's going to change the way people feel about you because you're trying to get away from the bad stuff. Here, it's flipped. The sheriff's deputy is trying to get away from the bad stuff as the security officer is continuing to close the gap on him, get close to him, and then he doesn't let him leave. He doesn't let him leave to end the bad stuff with a finality to it. And so, I think the sheriff deputy comes out looking aces all day. I do. Now listen, if there was a policy violated because he wasn't supposed to be there, I got it. But as far as level-headedness and how he dealt with the situation, he wins that every day of the week.
Yeah, I wish we could talk to both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be more. That just seems like but I think you're right. I think what happened is, and maybe that was what was told to the security officer, is under no circumstances are guns allowed in this office. And he took that to the strictest, you're not doing it. But then the fact that he was, because the deputy, I think what happened was he was asked, you can't bring your gun in here. And the deputy said, well, that's fine. I'll leave. I'm not leaving my gun. But then he tried to detain him or keep him from that. It's just a weird
and we would want some more follow-up. Is there a difference in this area past this door than this door and things like that, and maybe there's more of a secured or access area or something like that. But like I said, if we are basing this on just who is acting reasonable and who is not, the sheriff's deputy wins that every day.
I agree. That's our take on it. If you have any thoughts, comments, anything that you would have done differently from what we described, let us know. Be interested in it. But that's all I got. How about you?
No, we'll see you next time.